Peace, family. It's Asmar, Bilal, host here, Secure Tomorrows, where we talk about what happens after the lights, after the cheers, and how athletes build real legacy outside of the game. Today's guest, we got my man here with us, Adam Sargent. Man, pleasure to have you. How you doing?
I'm good, Asmar. It's good to see you, and I appreciate being with you today.
Yeah, likewise. No, I know we were kind of talking. It's been quite some time.
Yeah.
It feels good to be back at the University of Notre Dame.
Good to have you back, man. I always enjoyed our time together when you were here, so it's really nice to get back together.
Yes, sir. So let's rewind it back, right?
Yeah.
So I know, right, when we were here together, you were academic counselor. Is that still kind of like your position and title here at the university?
Yeah, my title is Associate Director of Academic Services for Student Athletes, but my primary role is to oversee the academic support for the football team, along with a really great staff that I work with. You know, and our job is to support and to challenge the young men who are playing football here to make sure that they're trying to maximize this opportunity and get ready for life after.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then I know for you, not only are you working here, but you were a former student athlete as well.
Many
right?
many years ago. Many years ago.
Many years.
Yeah.
And then for yourself, you played lacrosse. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's
so
right.
lacrosse for you. So you were a student athlete. What exactly brought you to Notre Dame? Why Notre Dame for you?
Well, you know, it's a good question. Look, I played 3 sports in high school. Lacrosse was the sport that I was best at. And I guess I had aspirations of playing in college, but it wasn't really until I made something called the Empire State Games, which is it's like Olympic Games in New York State, right? I grew up in upstate New York, Rochester, New York.
Upstate.
And when I made that team, I started to get recruited by schools that I had no right applying to without the support of the sport, right? I was a fine student in high school, but I was probably looking at like one of the state universities, Geneseo, Brockport, something close by, right? And then I started to get recruited by places like Notre Dame and Duke and Princeton and these schools that intimidated me to begin with, right? Like to be totally honest.
Yeah.
And you know, my family was very supportive, but it was a big surprise. I remember one time when the coach from Princeton called and my mom answered the phone, she thought it was a friend of mine making a joke on her and almost hung up on him because that wasn't the path that I was probably going to be on. But it was a great opportunity, so I took some visits. And the reason I chose Notre Dame was because it felt like a really good blend at that time. This was back in 1994, right? A long time ago, but really good school that I wouldn't normally have gotten into, so it was an opportunity that I could take advantage of. But you know, I was a public school kid my whole life, and when I visited some of the other schools in the Ivy League, it just didn't feel like a great fit, right? Whereas this place blended, I think, really good academics with a community that felt more comfortable for me, right, growing up. And I loved the coach, Kevin Corrigan, and I found that it seemed like it would provide me with a good environment where I'd be challenged, but I'd also be supported in a way that would help me develop probably in ways that I wouldn't have had I gone to a place that maybe didn't have the same infrastructure, the same community. So that was my choice, and it was a great one.
Yeah, for sure. And correct, you came from New York. To South Bend.
South Bend, yep. Now, again, upstate New York is different. I grew up in Rochester, which is about 5 hours from New York City.
Okay.
But it was a big difference. But I felt very comfortable with the community here. I felt like I fit in pretty good once I got here. I was intimidated by the academics initially, for sure. But outside of that, it felt like a really good fit.
Okay. And then for you, I think most of us know that experience you're super sharp academically. Like that's something that we know about yourself, right? I imagine you had great grades as well in high school.
I appreciate the compliment. Super sharp is not how I would describe myself necessarily, in that, look, I was really well-rounded. School wasn't the most important thing to me. So I worked hard, but it wasn't where all my effort went. So I had fine grades in high school, but I don't know, I was probably like a B+ student, right? I certainly wasn't a good enough student to get into Notre Dame without being recruited for lacrosse. And when I got here, I did okay too, but I had to work really hard for it. And when you say super sharp, I mean, I think what I've worked very hard to develop is I think deeply about things. I try and listen to other people. And I think that over time and through education and through life, I've developed some aspects of me where I think I do my job well, but like, I'm never the smartest guy in the room. And I know that, you know, and that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. I mean, it took discipline to even make it to that level. I mean, athletically, and then also academically. So what did Notre Dame teach you just in regards to preparation and focus?
You know, one of the things that I really took from the Notre Dame experience, and one of the reasons why I chose to come here, is that there was nowhere to hide in a good way. Every path was going to challenge you, right? So whether you're going to go into the College of Business or Arts and Letters or going into the STEM field, you're going to get challenged, and that was a really good thing, right? Because I think there's a temptation sometimes to take the path of least resistance when it's offered to you, right? When you have interest in other things. Like, yeah, I was very social, and I loved my sport. I also was curious, and I liked school, but I wasn't a natural student, right? So one of the great things about coming to Notre Dame was that, one, it required me to be present. Right? It's all about being in the classroom, right? That was very important to me. I knew that I couldn't skip class. I knew that I had to be there. I had to listen, take notes. I did my best to participate, but I wasn't going to teach myself the material on my own just by reading the books. Maybe some people can do that, but that's not my style. So Notre Dame taught me a lot of things. One, the importance of showing up. You got to be there.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to be a part of something and you want to get something and you want to contribute something, you have to be present. Right? So showing up was important. The willingness to ask questions and also to receive support. That's hard for a lot of people, right? I came here knowing that I was going to need support, and I collaborated with my fellow students, and I worked with the office that I work in now, right, to get tutors and to work with the academic counselor at that time. But one of the things I loved about Notre Dame is that it's a community that challenges you, but it also supports you. And that was an incredibly important part of it. So I did have to have discipline, right? I did have to go to class. I did have to pay attention. I did have to take good notes because I didn't have the natural gifts where I'd be able to just to kind of breeze through with minimal effort. I knew that this was going to be something. And that was a critical part of my development. Consistency, work ethic, integrity, right? And presence.
Huge values there. And then
served me for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then so you were playing here. So after your playing days, I know for you, I mean, you were a lifeline to many of the student athletes here. What exactly drew you to your role and mission here?
Sure. So look, man, like I had the injury. I'm in the wheelchair. I had a spinal cord injury, and that was in May of 1997, which was the summer in between my junior and senior year of college. When that happened, and I went from an able-bodied 21-year-old, I didn't have a concrete plan for my future at that point. I did love the world of education in some way. I came to really like it, or the human services. So I knew I wanted to do something. I thought I wanted to do something in education or counseling, something in that regard, right? It fit with my kind of passion for people. But one of the great things that I found, one of the great benefits to coming to a place like Notre Dame is that I developed in ways that I might not have at other institutions, if there was a path of least resistance. And that was very important to me because after my injury, my options were narrowed, okay? And it's not to say that I couldn't do many things in the chair, but part of my post-injury thought process was that I wanted to do something that I could do at a very high level. I wanted to be something where the disability of being in the chair wasn't highlighted every day. It didn't make my life harder because of the requirements of the job, right? It would fit well with the job. So I thought about things like travel was hard. I didn't necessarily want to have a job where I had to travel all over the place. Physical requirements on the job. I wanted to recognize the fact that I had limitations, so I wanted to be deliberate in how I chose something that would complement my strengths while not overly taxing the challenges that I had as a result of being in the chair. And as I reflected on that, the world of counseling was something that really, I think, was a calling. So I actually applied to some master's programs at the conclusion of my undergraduate experience, right after I graduated from Notre Dame. And instead of going directly into a master's, I actually had a great opportunity where I was invited to do an internship in the office that I applied and I was offered in academic services for student athletes, which I was familiar with as a former student athlete. And that gave me an opportunity to get a feel firsthand how I felt about working in education, working in the human services, working in a kind of counseling role. I really loved it and decided that I would do a master's in mental health counseling because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And when I did that program, which was an amazing program, I also worked in a hospital as part of the practicum and internships of a master's program. And I did counseling, mostly with a population of single women who were mothers that were in really difficult situations financially, okay? And I did that for 2 years, and I loved it. It was a very formative part of my professional life, right? Like the counseling piece. But I also recognized that I probably wanted to do something that involved more collaboration with people. So I was really thrilled when the opportunity to work full-time in academic services for student athletes presented itself, and I grabbed that. Now, that's not being a therapist, but it provides moments of therapy. So my master's in counseling served a really good purpose, and that was many years ago, and I've been in the office ever since.
Wow. And
it's been a really great blend of my passion for Notre Dame, my belief in what Notre Dame offers, right? Human services, working in a kind of a counseling field, right? And it was through that where I was able to really find my passion, and it fit really well with my life in a wheelchair.
Yeah, truly. And athletics too.
Yeah, it's still blended athletics. Look, I've always loved athletics. I loved playing the sports that I played. I loved the game. I never really wanted to coach afterwards. I was never a student of the game. It was the joy of the physical activity that really drew me to it, right? So when that chapter came to a close with the injury, it was something that I thought I would still like to be a part of in some capacity. And this position allowed me to do it in a way that still worked with athletes, but in a capacity really independent of their sport.
So let me ask you this. So, I mean, your accident, right, changed everything in an instance. So for you, what exactly, if you could just take us back to that day and what was going through your mind, right, at that moment of time?
Yeah. So the injury, it was a car accident. I was actually driving to St. Mary's College. I was taking an education class in summer school. And I had an exam that morning. So I was driving to St. Mary's College from my apartment at that point. And I got in a car accident. And I was ejected from the car, and on the way out of the car, I kind of broke my neck at the C6-7 vertebrae, and that's where the spinal cord injury happened. Because of the severity of the injury, and I also, although it didn't result in any type of lasting head wound, I had a really bad concussion. I don't remember that day really well. I think I have kind of flashes of it, but my first real coherent memory was in the hospital. And when it started to dawn on me as people were explaining what occurred, it was devastating. It was something that would require months, year of processing. You know, any major trauma, the loss of people, physical trauma, emotional trauma, you know, the grief process frequently takes quite a bit of time. You know, often a year, right? Is what, if you look at the research. And that was the starting point of a very hard grieving process, the loss of my physical self, right? And that was devastating. But I also was very fortunate to have a wonderful family and community around me. So in my time where I was really just not independent and at my lowest, I had wonderful support, you know, and that was very important to help me kind of move through it. One of the things, Asmar, though, that I kind of talk about the injury, the nature of the injury, It was an absolutely defining moment in my life, for sure. But the injury never defined me. And that was a really deliberate choice on my part to recognize that my life would never be the same. And I lost a tremendous amount in that moment, in that injury.
Right.
But I also still possessed every part of who I was, what made me me. So I had to redefine in some ways how I was going to find joy and how I was going to engage in the world in a meaningful way. All of that was super challenging. But it wasn't redefining who I was, right? The Adam Sargent that I was lived through that injury, although in a very challenging way. And it was at that time where I really worked to try and find a new method of engaging in the world around me that would allow me to still find meaning, find joy, and feel like I was doing something of value.
That's big time. And I think, honestly, I mean, when speaking about identity as an athlete, a lot of time your identity is wrapped around, I mean, your body, right? And then also a lot of what this podcast is about, when we speak to former athletes, of course, when you transition, that transition is always tough because athletes spend many, many years playing, developing the skill with hopes and aspirations to perhaps make it professionally. And then when it stops, I mean, these are all your years kind of encompassed into one, and then it comes to a halt. And I know for you at the University of Notre Dame, if you could, I think you already did, but of course in that moment, I mean, with your body, I mean, identity being so wrapped around the body, how exactly did you kind of redefine who you were in those instances?
So, you know, the way I engaged with the world, the things that gave me joy, physical activity, the sport I played, a lot of sports that I didn't play at the collegiate level, but still were very important to me, physical activity, all that kind of stuff. That was the hardest thing. To not have that outlet was devastating and took a lot of time. Now, what didn't change was who I was. So I had to look at where I found joy. I loved people. I loved interacting with people, my friends, right? I was a curious person. I liked learning, right? So I poured myself more into school than I ever had before that. I also was aware of the fact that if I wanted to still have a life that I imagined before the injury, and that was a life where I would do something that I loved, that I felt passionate about, I wanted to contribute to the world around me, I wanted to be a resource for the people around me, that I had to start making really difficult and disciplined decisions because the scope that I could do that in narrowed because of the injury. So it focused me. And it gave me a little bit of an edge in that I had to grow up in a way that maybe other people didn't have to at that point. And I had to start making deliberate decisions about what I was going to do in a way that would fit with my new body after the injury in the chair, but still be something that I felt passionate about. And it took a lot of reflection, a lot of thought, discipline, and also, and I don't know how else to describe it this way, but you had to move on. You had to mourn the things you lost. Not to say I don't look back and think of those things fondly. I do. But I also had to let go of the things that I lost and not dwell on what was no longer available to me and start to shift to what I still had and how I could pour myself into those things. Because that, to me, is how somebody weathers adversity, right? You accept the fact that there's loss, there's things that you're not going to be able to control, you do your best to retain what you can, but very quickly you have to start looking forward in a constructive way and make best of what has occurred.
Yeah, truly. And that's a great way of, I mean, thinking about it, right? What a strong mindset. So, I mean, a lot of athletes in that moment, they will let that moment break them. How exactly were you able to build and move forward just mentally, spiritually, and physically? What kind of helped you?
You know, one, it was the support network around me. If I didn't have the family I had, if I didn't have the Notre Dame family, if I didn't have, look, my dad had health insurance. I was in a rehab institute for 2 months, getting really good care. Not everybody gets that, right? Like I was really fortunate to have really good support. So that's first and foremost, right? Fear was the other motivator. I didn't want to be a failure. One of the greatest things that came from this injury was a really hard look at like, what do I do now?
Right.
Will I be a failure? Will I be somebody who has to rely on other people for the rest of my life? Will I find a way to contribute? Will I connect with people in meaningful ways? Will I find love? Will I find purpose? And fear was a great motivator for me at that time. I often say you don't want to make decisions based on fear, but at times you have to allow that genuine acknowledgement that we are not fully in control of our life to motivate you, right? So the fear motivated me. Pride, to be honest, motivated me. Pride to be something still, to do something that I felt good about. And when I was younger, it was important to me what other people thought of me more than it was now, right? And that was something that motivated me a little bit, right? So those are two things that, fear and pride, I don't always think those are the greatest things, but to be totally honest, in my moment of crisis, those were things that motivated me. And then as I started to heal emotionally, right, and started to move through the immediacy of the injury when it first occurred and started to shape my life moving forward, I think it was discipline. It was a deliberateness in how you think. When adversity occurs, right, like you said, it would break many people. I think people break when they're rigid, when they have a fixed idea about who they are and what they're going to do, when they have expectations that they can't relinquish, despite the fact that the world has changed around them. I've always been somebody who's been comfortable embracing uncertainty and kind of lived in the moment. That was always who I was, right? I look at the future, but I wanted to live in the moment, right? I wanted to be present to what was happening around me. When the injury occurred, I remained living in the moment. I remained somebody who wanted to be present to my immediate challenge. And if I was to look forward with a fixed idea about what I was going to do before the injury and say that's the only path that would provide me happiness, I probably would have broke.
Right.
Because that path was no longer available to me. But I didn't have that fixed idea. You had to be flexible. You had to adjust. You had to be willing to make some adjustments, knowing that there's uncertainty in front of me, but I still have a lot to offer. So I'm going to work really hard to shift and find a path that my current skill set could still do at a high level, right? And I think that helped me avoid that kind of breakage afterwards.
Right.
I moved on, right? And that's a really hard thing. Moving on from what you thought was going to be your life or what you hope to be your life when you have adversity, it's a very important part of, I think, being resilient and being able to weather the challenges that inevitably will come our way.
Yeah, truly. And then for you, so I know you've counseled many athletes through academic struggles and transitions. Do you think your journey and experience have just been able to help you be able to shape and help these athletes?
There's no doubt that my experience through the injury and redefining how I was going to engage in the world around me played a part in my development as somebody who could work in the counseling field. Okay, so yes, it played a part in developing how I look at the world. And as much as that's helpful, I never brought up my injury. I still don't.
Yeah.
To the guys I work with, to the
I think this is
students
my first time knowing myself.
Okay? There's a reason, right? Not to get too technical, but in the counseling field, one of the things I learned early on when I was going through school is that self-disclosure is actually not a very effective method by which you help other people change. You think about that, right? Well, this works for me, so you should do it, right? Or if you come to somebody and they go, well, this is what I did, and it was really important, and you should know that it worked for me and it'll work for you, or however it's that. When you have questions, mostly you're not looking for direct answers. You're looking for someone to walk with you through those questions, to be present and help you come to your own conclusion. So telling people like, hey, you should really work hard in school because look, if I didn't work hard in school, I would have been really out of luck because when the injury happened, if I hadn't really educated myself, I wouldn't have the options. That's not going to land on a 19 or 20-year-old or anybody, right? That's my life. That's my experience. So I never really brought it up. I don't use it in the conversations, but it absolutely played an important part in my development. I just don't think it's necessarily something that's helpful to put out there when I'm working with students. If they ask, I'm more than happy to talk about it. But that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so that's interesting because I think most people take, another side of the coin of, hey, I share this with you so that you can use this as perhaps a blueprint so that it can be able to help you as well. Yeah. So that's an interesting take.
I would say this, right? Like guidance, I think is best framed or provided within the context of the other person you're talking to, right? So I'll use my own lived experience, the wisdom, if you want to call it that I gained from my challenges. And I'll use that as I ask questions and as I reflect with a student. But I think it's far more effective, right, to be fully present to their experience and to help them work through their challenges, right, than it is to present what worked for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm not saying people shouldn't provide advice. Hey, this worked for me. You should do this. Hey, I made this mistake. You should learn from my mistake by not making your own mistake.
The focus.
Those are fine conversations to have. I don't think that's a good foundation to be somebody in the human services, in the field that I'm in. I think it's far better for me to retain that wisdom and then to allow it to emerge, right? Should the person ask and they're interested, I'll answer. But also to focus more on their experience because I think that's a more effective way of doing it. Yeah.
So focusing on them, but also having your experience to be able to help them navigate.
Yeah, so let me try and say it this way, just thinking out loud with you. My injury, my recovery, my journey through that part of my life was obviously defining, like I said. It helped firm up my convictions. So one of the things in my job, which I think you're aware of, is like I'm frequently challenging people. I'm challenging the decisions they make, the way they think, their habits, right? And that can create tension. And sometimes it can be uncomfortable for people, right? And they can get upset with me. They get angry, right? And I understand that. My conviction that working hard, having integrity, engaging in the educational process here in a way that will help them develop is strong. I don't need their approval to know that I believe deeply in that. That's my conviction. And that conviction was helped shaped by my experience. So one of the great things that it provides me with conviction to do things in the job that are hard. And that's often the challenge of the people. So if they get pissed, I'm okay with that because I know that what I'm doing, I believe deeply in, and I do believe it is in their best interest. I don't have all the answers for them, but I'm very comfortable challenging them because what I'm doing, I believe is going to help benefit their development. And I think that's where it really secured. My convictions are strong because of my experience, and that gives me the ability to do parts of the job that I think are very challenging. And even when things are not received well by the other person, right? Obviously, I have to pause and reflect and to continue to think, but I don't need their approval or their thanks in the moment to believe what I'm doing is in their best interest and to stick with it.
Understood. And then with that strong conviction of just integrity and hard work and knowing that, you know that your life can change in a blink of an eye. How would you challenge an athlete that, may go through an unexpected time? How would you prep them now to prepare themselves for that unexpected?
That's a good question. So perhaps most important as I've reflected back over time is I challenge students to reflect frequently on how their choices and their habits, their behaviors are impacting the outcomes in their life. Okay? And what I mean by that is, look, it's hard sometimes to take ownership of the choices we make that have poor outcomes. It doesn't feel good. But that is a very, very important part of empowering you to make adjustments and change because it's under your control. So one of the things that I've worked very hard over the years to do is to encourage people to take ownership of the things they can control, to reflect on their flaws, because we all have them, to not be ashamed of those flaws, to not be embarrassed by those flaws, to look at them honestly, take ownership of them, and through being deliberate in how we think and intentional in the choices we make, help to improve how we engage with the world around us. That's growth, right? There's going to be adversity outside of your control, but if you really are good about being honest with yourself, about the things you're doing well that help you have success, but also at the things that you're doing that might be getting in the way of you maximizing your potential, and being willing to take ownership of that, look at it, be uncomfortable for a little bit, but then be able to go, I need to make some changes because I'm getting in my own way. Yeah. That's a very important part of it. The other part of it, the other piece, is you got to be genuine and authentic, man. You got to like who you are. It's very easy to give that away. It's very easy to wake up and realize that you haven't been true to yourself and that you've made choices, maybe short-sighted, maybe in a moment of weakness, and you don't love yourself as much as you did. So it's really important that not only are you honest with yourself about your flaws and the things that maybe you need to be able to change so that you can be more effective, but also to remain true to yourself. Because one of the important things about weathering adversity in that moment of quiet, right? For me, it was in a hospital bed. For me, it was in a rehab center. I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck with myself. And if I didn't, at my heart, like who I was, that would have been an infinitely harder experience. I hated the injury. I hated the outcome of the injury. I hated what I lost. But I liked myself still. I liked who I was. I liked how I treated people. I was proud of myself, not because I was perfect, far, far from it. I made a lot of poor decisions, like we all do. But I worked hard to try and do right by myself and to others. And that's something that is easy to give away, and all of a sudden you wake up and you're not as happy with who you are. It's harder to weather hard times when you're not comfortable and at peace with yourself.
Yeah. And that's strong. I think a lot of times, just thinking about setbacks, in this instance, what seemed as a setback became a strength. And just knowing from your experience, I know there's many things that could still distract you, but I think with this, traumatic event alone, it caused you to be still because you literally could not move, right? You couldn't move in that instance. So do you think that event and causing you to be still helped you to be reflective and helped you to kind of look within to really be able to fortify who you believe yourself to be and be able to help the identity forming for yourself?
I do. It certainly accelerated it, right? Like, would I have gotten there on my own? I don't know. It was who I was. It was still a part of who I was. But to your point, when all other options are removed, right? Yeah. When I didn't have, look, you can always distract yourself. You can always lie to yourself. You can always delude yourself. Right. So I could have done that. I didn't do that. I sat and reflected on where I was, how I got there, and kind of what I wanted to try and do moving forward with the new realities of my life. And to your point, that stillness, the lack of choice, I think that was a very important part of providing me, forcing me to make some very hard decisions and think some through some very challenging thoughts. But yeah, I think that absolutely helped me develop in some important ways.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And then also with this question, I know we're speaking philosophically, but through your experience alone, how do you think, what are some techniques or some different things that you think that athletes can be able to take on to help them be able to find their purpose, right, outside of just the sport alone? Because I think a lot of athletes' identity really is tied to what they do. And a lot of, you know, the fans, your friends, your family, they also add on to that identity. But in the core of it all, you have your own purpose, right? And you got to be able to understand who you are. So do you think there's any techniques or just anything that could be able to help an athlete be able to refocus and look in to truly know what their purpose really is?
I think that's a great question. One of the things that it's become harder over the years potentially, but athletes specialize, right, early, right? So to answer the question, one of the pieces that I think is really important it requires discipline and requires a lot of intentional thought is that you have to explore other parts of who you are while still pouring yourself into that primary or most passionate part of you, being an athlete. If you're truly one-dimensional, if you think in a way that this is the path towards my success, I love the accolades I get from my success in sport, I believe that it's going to help me get to college, and I believe I'm going to have an option to play professionally, and that will be my path. And you look at it almost singularly. Not only are you investing and risking a lot should it not work, right? It might not work for a variety of reasons. You might not be as talented as you thought you were.
Right.
You might get injured, right? The field that you're working in, the industry might change. There might not be the same opportunities. There's all these things outside of your control. So that's a hell of a risk to just go, I'm going to do one thing because that's what I'm going to do and I'm good at it and I love it and that's what's going to be my future. But you also miss out on the richness of who I hope all of us to be. And that is, we are multifaceted people that hopefully are developing all sorts of your life, right? And that should be your interpersonal development, hopefully your intellectual development, your curiosity in the world around you, right? Learning and developing and questioning, being comfortable not having the immediate answers, right? That also involves, hopefully, change, right? Who and what you want to do at 12 is different than what you want to do at 18, and hopefully maybe different than what you want to do at 20 and 22. And those things should change as you encounter new opportunities and the world expands in front of you if you allow it, right? What you want to major in college. You might have an idea before you get there, but then you get to college and you realize there are all these different options. And despite the fact that maybe I thought I wanted to do this since I was a kid, something else is calling to me. And you have to give yourself permission to explore those different paths. You have to be willing. But to do it superficially, if you're just a singular being, if you're just focused only on sport, you're not going to do it to a depth that's going to create change and growth. So you have to carve out space. Like I said at the very beginning of our conversation, genuine presence to those other things. And my hope for people, that involves friendships, that involves romantic relationships, that involves career opportunities, that involves hobbies, right? That involves all of these things that you encounter as you move through life. And in order for you to really develop, to really grow, I think in a healthy way, but also practically speaking in a way that's going to not only provide you with more outlets for success, but also outlets for happiness. You have to be willing to spend time on those things. Athletics today can make that hard. It's obviously most important what the person's mindset is. Are they willing to look at themselves as more than simply what you do in your sport. But it also requires, in addition to your mindset, you have to have the opportunity to do that as well. So if you play a sport, and you start playing a sport at 12 years old, and you play that all year round, and you have to travel, and you can't go to summer camps, and you can't have time off, and you can't go to a museum, and you can't do all the things that I think are important parts of a young person's development because you're so committed to that sport, or people in your family believe that you should be spending all your time and energy on that sport, you're robbing that person, yourself, of really important opportunities for growth. The key thing is this, and I say this to the prospects that we meet, right? Families and prospects in the recruiting process. Your sport can be the most important thing to you. There's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't mean you do other things poorly. It just requires more discipline. It requires a willingness to be very deliberate in giving attention to other things. I truly believe this. And I think this is one of the things that makes Notre Dame athletics unique in our landscape. Notre Dame is committed to the development of the full person. And we do it not only because we think it's going to give our students the best quality of life and the best opportunity to have success and to be happy. We do it because you can have more in your life at the same time as you pursue athletics at a high level. I don't believe, and we don't believe, that doing all those other things will marginalize your ability to be a great football player or women's soccer or men's lacrosse, right? If you're disciplined and you make time to condition yourself and to be fully engaged in practice and to be good in the weight room and to eat right and to get sleep and all the things that we know are important to developing as an athlete, that should not, if you're disciplined, that should not get in the way of you thinking deeply about academic issues that might be really curious and interesting to you. That shouldn't get in the way of you having deep friendships and romantic relationships and making time to go out and do those things. That shouldn't get in the way of you having hobbies. Now again, there's not infinite time, and there's not infinite energy, so you are going to make some hard decisions. But it is an important part of our job and my job to challenge students to look at themselves as more than a singular thing. And not only because I believe they can still be exceptional in their sport while still doing other things, but because I think it would be a terrible disservice to them to not challenge them to start expanding their horizons and engaging in things, because at some point, to your point, that sport will no longer be the primary outlet in your life. If you live long enough, life is about loss. You lose things. You lose physical prowess, you lose people that pass, you lose the opportunity to pursue sport because your body doesn't allow you to do it at the same level. That's a natural part. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of life. And you're far better equipped to deal with loss when you have a well-rounded experience that allows you to engage in things and to find joy in things beyond simply one aspect of your lived experience.
That's deep. It's refreshing too, because I think outside of here, I think you hit it on its head. The uniqueness about Notre Dame is it's the pursuit of excellence. It's the abundant mindset of not only seeking and being one-dimensional in athletics, but it's well-rounded. It's the understanding that it's not scarcity where you only have to focus and put all your marbles in this bag. You can spread them out and pursue excellence all, right? Because you have the capacity and bandwidth to be able to.
You do.
And I think you mentioned the discipline to be able
That's
to. So I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And I think it's honestly true, because what I speak about is even in the professionals, right? NFL perhaps stands for not for long. It's the average time in the league is 3 years. And once it's over, you have, I mean, if you're granted, you have many years of life left.
Yeah.
So the transition is inevitable. So when you pursue excellence in academia and pursue it in other facets of life, you have developed and cultivated skill sets that's going to ascend right far past just athletics alone. So I think it's crucial that you brought up that point.
And if you have the right support and the right network, look, man, Notre Dame not only philosophically believes that, but they they also provide the infrastructure, the right resources. Because it's really hard to do all of those things. And there's going to be trade-offs. You're going to have to make sacrifices at some point. But what we do as a community is what I hope every young athlete will remember. And that is like, it starts with you. You have to be willing to be disciplined and make choices to pursue those other outlets. But you also have to then look around and see who's supporting you in that regard. And who's going to help you do that and give you, for lack of a better term, permission and resources to be focused on other aspects of your life. Notre Dame does that. We believe that's a critical part of the human development, right? And to your point, it better equips you for the adversity in life. Look, I want to say one thing too about this, and not to get too far off on the NFL, but that's the group I work with is football.
Yeah.
I say this to the students I work with when they're here. I talk about it with prospects in the recruiting process too, about their evaluation of where they want to go to college and spend their time as student athletes. Talent's overrated. The NFL is an industry, just like investment banking, just like engineering, just like anything else, right? Being talented and unprofessional and undisciplined, being talented and reckless with your money, being talented and reckless with your conditioning, being somebody that you can't count on, that they can't count on to be disciplined in how you are managing maybe the fame, maybe the temptations that come with being a professional athlete, the demands, right? Let's be very clear here. You're not going to be there very long if you think it's just talent. If you don't bring the professionalism that anybody in the marketplace thinks is a critical part of being a high-level professional, you're doing yourself a disservice. So developing the ability to be reliable and trustworthy, a person of integrity, somebody who is thoughtful, can make difficult decisions under stressful circumstances, that can resist temptation, right? All of those things are going to help you be a professional athlete. Those are not irrelevant, right? Talent won't overcome all of those things if you have deficits there. I think that's also a very important thing. To be very practical, that's also a very important part of the development here.
Understood. So just for, athletes, student athletes, or just those going through the transition, what are things that you think athletes need to do and need to focus on just with their time before the game is over to prepare themselves so when the game is over, they have security? To kind of go back and reiterate, one, recognize that you can be exceptional in your sport while still developing other important parts of who you are, your identity. You don't have to marginalize your competitiveness, your development, if you're disciplined, if you make good choices. You can be exceptional as an athlete and well-rounded in other parts of your life. And being well-rounded in other parts of your life is absolutely, I think, the most important part in preparing somebody to transition away from athletics, right? Not only your identity, not only why you have value, but also finding a sense of purpose that you're passionate about. Now, it might never be something you're as passionate about as your sport. That might never happen, but it might. And even if it doesn't happen, you're still finding outlets that you believe in, that you have convictions about, and that's going to help you make that transition and find meaning in your life, right? Because you have outlets that provide purpose, that you think have value, and that you spent time developing and preparing to engage in those outlets once that outlet of athletics comes to a close. So well-rounded is critical. It should not marginalize your ability to be a high-level athlete if you're disciplined and if you make good choices, right? That's really important. And then two, I'm going to go back to the part we talked a little bit about after my injury, and that is making choices so that you still, at your core, like who you are. It's a very important part. Now, maybe that's less practical when it comes to career success. I don't know. But when it comes to happiness in life, you're with yourself all the time, right?
Now, we can distract ourselves. We can present things in our lives and structure our lives in a way where we don't have to necessarily reflect. But in those quiet moments, and I would say as much distraction as you might put into your world, you're still
with yourself.
And you still, if you're unhappy, if you don't like who you are because you don't treat people well, or because you're not a person of integrity, or because you gave away parts of your core identity under social pressure or under professional pressure or whatever it might have been, right? Whatever reason you use to surrender, it's critical that you think deeply as you make your choices in life so that you can still go to bed at night and feel peace and like yourself. Now again, you might not like every decision you made that day, right? And you might really be frustrated with yourself or resent yourself or feel embarrassed because you made some colossally stupid mistakes. That's part of being human. But it's reflecting on that regularly and doing your best to make choices that allow you to like the person that you're looking at in the mirror. And that, even when professional opportunities don't go well, even when interpersonal opportunities don't go well, you can fall back on that and still find a sense of peace and like who you are. And when it comes to having a good quality of life, I don't think there's anything more important to that.
That's big. And I think it's practical in a sense too that, of course, when you know yourself and are happy with yourself, I think inherently you're a more productive person. You're able to contribute significantly more.
Agree 100%, right? Look, you can do a lot of things when you're not, but it's exhausting. It's really hard to do. When you can show up as your authentic self, you're absolutely right. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be more passionate. You're going to be more engaged. You're going to work harder and longer because it fits and feels good, right? Not every part of it's perfect, but for the most part, you leave the day as you go home and you feel like, okay, that was a good day because I'm doing what I love, I do what I believe in, and it's true to myself, right? But to do that, you have to be really deliberate in how you make your choices over the course of your life.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's very useful information. I think everything that you said is invaluable for, all athletes transitioning. I know even with your convictions, you've challenged me to do more. And I think it's helped me, and I think it's invaluable for all those that are listening to pursue excellence in all facets and all outlets of life. And I think it'll make you a better and more well-rounded person to where you don't have to just rely on an identity or create an identity of just what you do, whether that's sport, work, or whatever it is in life. So thank you for hopping on.
Hey, man, great to catch up again, and thanks for including me in this.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.